Namaskar. Welcome to Ancient Wisdom. Today we'll be seeing the stories of 6 gurus and the treatment of the society and the behavior of the society towards them. The 6 are Socrates, Galileo and Alan Turing from Western world, and Charvak, Madhwacharya and Ramanujacharya from India. Each one of them is a contemporary of one and other. So Socrates is contemporary of Charvak, Madhwacharya and Ramanujacharya are contemporaries of Galileo, and Alan Turing is the most recent as 1940. First, let us take Socrates. Socrates was one of the most popular teachers in ancient Greece. His school was the biggest and people used to flock to it even from abroad, not only from Greece. But he was tried in a court of law, and what were the charges? The charges were that he was poisoning the mind of his students because he did not believe in God. And he was tried, he was judged, and it was inferred that he was guilty and he was punished with death. He was to consume poison and die, and he did, and just for his belief. Let us come to Galileo. Galileo was a scientist, and especially experimental scientist, because till that time philosophy was only discussion. Galileo was the first one who was supposed to be called as experimental philosopher. So he said, by discussion only things cannot be sorted. We have to experiment to see whether there is truth in the argument or not. For that matter, at that time, there was existing belief that if I were to throw a light thing and a heavy thing together, the light thing will float and come to bottom or come to ground at a much later time than a heavier thing. This was a finding, or this was a theory that was not tested for almost 600 years. It was taken for granted that a light thing will fall later, a heavier thing will fall faster. Galileo went to the Tower of Pisa with a small ball and with a big ball. Both balls he dropped at the same time, and people on the ground realized that they hit the ground at the same time. A theory that had lasted for 700 years came to naught just with one experiment. That was the caliber of Galileo. And how did the society react to Galileo? In case of Galileo, when he proposed, and he did not propose it originally, it came from Copernicus. He only propagated that theory that Earth was not the center of the universe, Sun was the center of the universe, and that Earth moved around the Sun. But this went against the religious beliefs of that time. So he was called in and was told to give a public apology. He did not give public apology. He was tried in a court of law, and he was sentenced either to life imprisonment or to accept in public that what he was saying, what he was believing was wrong, and not to teach in public anymore. He accepted that, and we lost a great scientist and many inventions perhaps. And last but not the least was Alan Turing, who in 1940s helped Britain in a great way to win the Second World War. Alan Turing was a mathematics scientist. His story is also told in the beautiful picture, Beautiful Minds. He broke the code or transmission code of the Germans, as a result of which all the German messages which were sent on telegraph could be deciphered by the British people or British military, and they could understand or they could know of German plans or what the Germans were doing at which point and where they are likely to strike. As a result, it was found that he was gay, and being gay at that time was a crime in Great Britain. And this famed scientist, this great scientist, was charged, punished with chemical castration. Also, his scientific career came to an end with this. These were the three stories from Western world that we have seen. Now we'll come to India. We'll start with Ramanujacharya and Madhwacharya. As we have said earlier, there are 6 theories or 6 philosophies of Astic Hinduism: Yoga, Sankhya, Nyaya, Vaisheshika, Purva Mimamsa and Uttar Mimamsa. And also 3 Nastic philosophies, which will come to later. In this, by the time of Ramanujacharya and Madhwacharya, the prevalent system was of Uttar Mimamsa. Adi Shankaracharya had the Hinduism based on Uttar Mimamsa or Vedanta. Madhwacharya and Ramanujacharya were opposing this trend that was going on at that time. Madhwacharya proposed Dvaitism. Dvait, that is, Jeev and Paramatma are separate and not together, and they never meet. They remain separate as ever. That was his basic philosophy. Whereas Ramanujacharya's teaching was that again it was same as Dvaita to some extent, and it is Vishishta Dvaita. That means the Jiva and the Paramatma are same but different at the same time, and they don't meet. Whereas the Uttar Mimamsa or Vedanta of Shankaracharya was propagating that Jiva and Paramatma are one and the same. The question is only of quality, only of quantity, and not the quality. And only the outside form differs and the inside is all same. It was called as the philosophy of Advaita, as against the philosophy propagated by Ramanujacharya, which was Vishishta Advaita, and Madhwacharya, which was Dvaita philosophy. Both of these teachers were honored in their lifetime. They were brought to King's Court and they were allowed to debate along with other philosophers, and their philosophy was heard, studied, maybe not accepted by some, maybe accepted by some, but people were allowed, or people were democratically allowed to choose on their own which philosophy they wanted to have. Both of Ramanujacharya and Madhwacharya even today have great following in India, and various temples they have erected. The temples are still standing erect in India. None of them was persecuted by any king. But then we can say that they were only differing in their view as concerns the original view. Whereas, let us take the case of Charvak. Charvak was at the time of Buddhism, and he was directly and diametrically opposite to everything that Hinduism preached. He was opposing all the 6 philosophies of Hinduism at the same time. He said rebirth doesn't exist. He said Swarga, Narak, afterlife doesn't exist. And he said anything other than Pratyaksha Anubhav, that is direct perception, did not exist. Something that you cannot directly perceive does not exist. Interestingly, this is the view taken by modern scientists also, that if you cannot perceive, it does not exist. And on top of that, he said morals and ethics have no value in life. Have sensual pleasure. All that there is to it, the body is that. All that there is to it. Enjoy the body, enjoy the bodily pleasures, enjoy the sensual pleasures to the greatest extent that you can. And there is not going to be any known for his philosophy called as Charvakian philosophy, which says Yatha jivet sukham jivet ऋणम कृत्वा घृतम पिबेत भस्मीभूतस्य देहस्य पुनरागमनम कुतः. So far as you live, enjoy your life with materialistic comforts. Once the body is burnt, there is no coming back. There is no rebirth. Completely, directly, diametrically opposite to all views. But then in India, no king supported him. No king backed him. At the same time, they called him to their court and they allowed him to have debate with the existing philosophers as of then. And even today, in various books of various philosophers, Charvakianism is given a mention. And then it is also, after the explanation is given, it is also said that why they differ with it, why they don't accept it. This is the tolerance of the Giuseppe Garibaldi's statement, who was a great Italian freedom fighter. I don't agree with a single word you say, but I will fight to death for your right to say it. This is more true in Indian society than the society that Garibaldi was born in, Italy and Western Europe. If anybody says Indian society has been intolerant, do guide him to this video on Charvak, Ramanuja, Madhwa, Socrates, Galileo and Alan Turing. Namaskar.